thanks very much for offering food for thought, along with the meagre offerings of the media team for lunch. I can see a fair number of people wanting to ask questions. Can I ask you to wait for our microphones to reach you, and also just to tell us who you are and where you're from. So, starting sort of left to right, if I can start with the gentleman over there and work round. We'll take 2 or 3 if we may, so we can actually hear from as many people as possible.
Hi, Sam Kennedy from Bloomberg News. I was wondering if you could provide an outlook. Assuming they don't take on your advice, and assuming they continue the current path, is there a chance that the ECB's work, continue with another 3-year auction in February, could kind of buy enough time for the governments to act, Angela Merkel's act, and in doing so kind of lure investors back into some of those markets that you see as strength?
Could you just repeat your
Sure.
The ECB doing what?
The ECB in buying time for action. I think I'm right in saying?
Yeah, and can they continue to do so, and by buying the time for the governments, perhaps governments act and then investors kind of are lured back into the sovereigns?
Okay, I see. Let's not have quadruple decker questions, but then I always keep that it's. So, ECB buying time, gentleman there.
Marco Panara, La Repubblica. Being an Italian, I'd like to make a question about Italy. How do you see what the new government is doing and how it will affect the stability of euro and the euro?
So, possibility for the ECB to buy time. Italy, lady at the end.
Yes, I'm from China, from Tencent. You have the articles, very interesting article about China to deal with the currency crisis. But what's the solution? What is the recent observation of the early internationalization? And we know that you have a big office in Hong Kong. I'm from Hong Kong. What do you want to do in Hong Kong? Is it Hong Kong would be the good hub for early internationalization?
So will Hong Kong be a good hub for the international trade in the renminbi? So let's try and take those 3. And I wish I could say they formed a seamless partnership, but they don't.
The big issue is how does euro cope with the danger of a Greek default, because that is something that is looming. It may or may not be avoided, but the euro zone, the rest of the eurozone needs to be. You need a stronger firewall than has been established to withstand the possibility of a Greek default. And that is where my concern is, and that is where I think the Padua Scopa plan could come in useful, because by enabling Italy and Spain to borrow at 1%, that would definitely set them apart from Greece. So that's why I bring this up, as that we have a tool that would actually help us get through that very serious test that is facing us. I think Italy actually is doing really quite well. The Monti government is a big difference between Greece and Italy. In Greece, the politicians are actually in the government and are preparing for elections. And so you have a very unfavorable political dynamic operating in Greece. And in Italy, you have a technocratic government, and the politicians have to go along with it, which they are doing now. But as Mario Monti has now repeatedly stated, there has to be some reward. That has to show. It has to bring some positive benefits to Italy, because that will strengthen the Monti government, and that will, let's say, discourage Berlusconi from thinking of toppling the government, because if he were to deprive Italy of the benefit of being able to borrow at 1%, he would be punished at the polls. So he would have no inducement to overturn the Monti government. It would strengthen the Monti government. So that's why I'm advocating it. And Hong Kong, of course, actually has emerged as an important hub of offshore renminbi, although developments in the last month or so have slowed things down considerably.
Okay, I'm carrying on with the Mexican wave style of taking questions here, because I can see a huge number of hands rolling up. So I'm going to start there and then take this table. And if we can just keep the questions as pithy as I know you're all capable of being.
Thank you. Do you foresee a smaller euro in 2012? And also, what is your best guess about the United States strategy in resolving Eurozone crisis, or just let it deteriorate later? Thank you.
What's the first part?
A smaller euro in 2012 and US strategy on resolving the euro crisis. And we're just going to try and take a few more questions because I think almost everybody in the House has a question for us.
Hello, I'm Dr. Silvestri, Anna knows my name. Swedish economy has also been quite successful besides Germany. Why do you think, and can the rest of Europe learn anything from this? Thank you.
I'll recap it for you.
Alexander Lupser, Swiss TV, Swiss Television. The Swiss National Bank fixed a minimum exchange rate of 120 between Swiss franc and euro. Would you speculate against it? Do you think it's the right measure?
Okay, I'll rattle through those questions, which is to say, are we going to see a smaller euro in 2012? US strategy to deal with the eurozone. Are there lessons to be learned from the Swedish economy and its success? And finally, the Swiss franc. Is that something you'll be speculating against in the months to come?
Well, let's go on.
Start with the euro.
So, that's really, since I argue that markets are unpredictable, this is one of the things that actually can't be predicted because it depends on the decisions that are going to be taken. So Greece obviously is on the edge of default, which could push Greece out of the eurozone. It would require, I mean, the odds, let's say, are in that direction, and therefore you have to strengthen the rest of the eurozone so that it should hang together more strongly, and that is the task that needs to be accomplished. And you asked about the United States has been taking a position of benign neglect, I would say.
And Sweden, particularly, has
Yes,
been...
well, I think the Swedish way of dealing with the financial crisis, injecting equity, effectively temporarily nationalizing the banks, was, in my opinion, a more effective way of dealing with it than let's say, socializing the liabilities, but not the equity of the banks. So I think the Swedish model was very successful in that respect.
And lastly, how safe is the Swiss National Bank in fixing the franc to the euro?
Well, first of all, I'm retired from running the hedge fund, and secondly, I would not speculate against it because the Swiss National Bank is in a position to print as many Swiss francs as are necessary to preserve that. That was, I think, a very clever maneuver on the part of the Swiss National Bank.
Thank you. Okay, moving down table, gentleman at the front. Lady in
Hi, I'm from Beijing, China Central Television. I just want to ask a question about the United States. And President Obama had just addressed his State of Union, and he said it emphasizing more on the middle class and imposing more taxes on millionaires and overseas companies. I just want to know your comments on it, whether it is good for the American economy and whether it is good for Obama's presidential election.
The taxes, the State of the Union speech, or?
About the State of the Union speech imposing more taxes on overseas companies.
Lady there? Lady there.
Pascal from France. What would ever convince Germany to change its course, its approach to the crisis? And second quick question, are you exposed to this?
And lady on the left.
The IMF yesterday, Alexandra Führer from the Austrian Daily Der Standard, the IMF yesterday said they expect just a mild recession for the euro. So, do you agree?
Okay, so recapping on those questions.
The first one I didn't.
A chance to respond to Obama's State of the Union speech where he called for taxes on millionaires. And the second question was Germany changing course.
That's the one. I happen to be one of the billionaires who believe that you need, the rich do need to pay more taxes, and I do support the Obama program in that respect, and I'm very much a minority, I think, in the hedge fund community, because they don't like being taxed.
Are you a billionaire ganging up on millionaires?
Basically, you asked about Germany changing its mind. I think it has to be an argument. I mean, the argument is really very strong, and I think it has to eventually sink in. And I think that people in Germany are first of all committed to a peaceful Europe. There's all the history that would lead them to that. And I think they're also pretty well educated. I understand their position because they've been traumatized by inflation, and they just simply don't understand the threat that deflation can cause. Incidentally, the statutes of the European Central Bank call for maintaining stability, and that means fighting against deflationary threats as well as inflationary threats. But in Germany, they only look at the threat of inflation, and fighting inflation at the time of deflation is just simply the wrong policy.
And just briefly, the IMF has spoken about a mild recession. Is that an analysis that you share?
I think the IMF has recognized and is telling the world that fiscal austerity is going to aggravate the situation. So they are coming out with more realistic estimates of what's ahead than the governments themselves.
Okay, we're going to move down the table. Lady from Chinese television has had a hand in the air, and there's a gentleman there, and Mr. Sam Fleming.
Soros, I'm from China.
Oh, can you turn the microphone? Seems to have switched itself off.
Okay. How China should be responding to the Eurozone crisis, and has any advice for Chinese leaders?
Okay, that's China, and we had another question just there, that gentleman.
My name is Sayyid Ran from Arabic Publication Dubai. I would like to know how, if this crisis continues, how it is going to affect the Arab countries, especially the countries that have come out of Arab Spring, how it is going to affect the funding of those countries.
Okay. And just moving tables.
Sam, from the Times. Figures this morning show the UK economy is back in contraction as of the fourth quarter. I wonder what conclusions you draw from this and whether this suggests the coalition government's fiscal consolidation program is too aggressive. Thanks.
Okay, we're seeing a return to autarky in those questions, I think, aren't we? Sure. First question coming from China. How should China respond to the euro crisis?
I think that the Chinese government is preparing the Chinese public that they may not be able to maintain the 8% growth that was taken for granted because of the diminished demand for Chinese exports. And there is a question of how long the Chinese model of growth can be maintained, and I think that the Chinese government is preparing for a change that would be lower rate of growth in the future.
And now turning to the Arab world, what impact will it have on investment in the Arab world, this current crisis?
Well, I see the Arab Spring as one of the, let's say, more hopeful signs in the world. And so far, so good. And I think it's important that this revolution should be successful, because if it isn't, it's liable to be followed by other revolutions which would be less benign than the one that is currently occurring. And there is a big danger that, for instance, I was in Tunisia, where the Islamic majority is behaving, the Islamic Democrats are actually behaving more like Christian Democrats than Islamic extremists, and are really, the political situation is very favorable. However, when I was there, November exports to Europe in November dropped by 10%. And that could be a danger for Tunisia. So I'm worried that the euro crisis is a threat for the very positive developments, both political and economic, which are occurring in the developing world in general and in the Arab world in particular.
And lastly, on the UK, the fiscal consolidation going on there, is that something you think is going to impact Britain's opportunity to rebound economically?
Well, I think that to expect a rebound is unrealistic. But Britain, because it is in control of its own currency, is in better situation as far as its ability to refinance itself. So Britain benefits actually currently for not being part of the euro.
Okay, moving downstream and across. I can see a couple of hands up at the back of that table. Gentleman just behind you, Abby, I think, has also had his hand up quite high.
Mr. Soros, RBC of Russian Business Television, from Russian Open Society. There are speeches in Russia about global national currency and the possible reserve in the national currency. How we implement it?
Okay, thank you. We just get a couple more voices from that table.
Louis from More Reason. Mr. Soros, you said one of the flaws about the euro is that it lacks rules for how to exit the currency zone. So could you please elaborate on how you envisage the details in such a monetary prenup agreement?
Okay, and lastly, just lady next door.
Mr. Soros, Amy Kellogg from Fox. I was just wondering what you think is the biggest impediment to job creation in Europe.
Okay, going through those one at a time. So, firstly, the Russian currency, the ruble. What prospects ask the gentleman for it as an international reserve currency?
I think dim.
I think we can leave that one there. Leaving the euro. What about what are the sort of necessary moves to enable countries to leave the euro? What are the sort of prenup agreements that need to be put in place?
Well, I think that there is no provision for exiting the euro. Greece may pose a problem if it in fact defaults, and then not having a primary surplus leaves the euro. Incidentally, defaulting by itself does not necessarily mean that they leave the euro, but the need to reach at least a primary surplus may force Greece out of the euro. And actually, the problem in Greece is, one of the problems in Greece is that there is a pretty powerful group of that is in favor of Greece leaving the Eurozone. And actually, many of the owners of newspapers and owners of conglomerates have very big arrears in paying taxes, and they much prefer to pay those taxes in drachma rather than in euros. And that is actually one of the reasons why Greece is in the trouble that it is. So that will give a serious problem of having to design rules for leaving the euro, and I think it's better to strengthen the euro and to make it more cohesive, so that leaving actually becomes really not realistic. Just as no state in America would think of leaving the Federal Reserve System, so in the same way you need to strengthen the political union in Europe, so that the euro actually remains solid currency.
You've talked about the euro extensively. What about the measures necessary for job creation?
That is basically the main problem, I think, is insufficient demand. Now, there's also structural reforms that could help. There's no question that there are need for structural reforms, but structural reforms alone can't make up for the deficiency of demand if you have this deflationary debt spiral.
Okay. Moving tables. Ugo at the front, and then we'll just move across.
Sole 24 ore of Milano. Let me follow up the issue regarding the job creation. This morning on a panel, some WhatsApp in America said job creation is against job stability. Do you agree on that?
Job creation is against job stability. Is that something you agree with?
Well, that is a structural reform of creating a more flexible labor market. So definitely it's an element. But I'd like to emphasize that that alone will definitely not do the trick.
Moving tables. I see a host of hands. Start at that side and move along.
Chundan from Xinhua News Agency. Since the last EU summit in December has set out the fiscal compact, which I think is a rough direction for the future fiscal union or fiscal integration. Do you think it is a right direction or a wrong direction? And do you think that this step is strong enough to sustain the confidence in the Eurozone? And another question for me is that in the current status condition, do you think the devaluation of euro or strengthening the euro, which one is a better choice for the Eurozone?
Okay, I'm just going to take a couple more questions down at the front and just moving back down the table.
Yeah, Jeff Couple, CNBC Asian, thank you. Mr. Soros, could you tell us, in dollar terms, would you buy gold today and can it go much higher from here in US dollar terms? And if you were to buy equities, which countries' stocks right now represent the best value?
There's a lot in that. Starting with the euro, the measures outlined at the Euro Summit in December, are they sufficient to restore confidence? And the second question on whether you see the euro being better off weakening or strengthening. And then we'll stop there and we'll go to gold.
First on the measures taken so far, I think I've listed the defects of the euro. And I'll be very frank with you, I myself didn't, I was aware of some of the defects, but not all of them, until they actually emerged. In particular, this disadvantage of borrowing in a foreign currency is one that has really come out only because of the intransigence of the authorities in sticking to the letter of the law and preventing the ECB from acting as a genuine lender of last resort. So it's partly the policies pursued, particularly by the Bundesbank, that has brought this out. And therefore, I don't think that the extent to which the euro is broken has been recognized, and therefore what is proposed, the fiscal compact and so on, is maybe a necessary first step, but you still need that stimulus without which the euro is counterproductive and unsustainable in the long run. However, the uncertainty surrounding the euro, which is depressing the exchange rate, is actually beneficial to Europe, and particularly to Germany. Actually a lower euro exports the problem, transfers it to the rest of the world.
Thank you. Our lunchtime clock is winding down, so I think I've nearly got around to the final table. Jeff Cutmore from CNBC is after a little free investment advice. Would you buy gold today in US dollars? And also, which countries do you see as being... Which countries' stocks are best valued at this moment?
Well, I tell you, at this moment, I'm rather happy to have retired, because frankly, if I were running the fund, I would have a very difficult time in knowing given the degree of uncertainty, how to invest my money. So I'm glad to leave it to others.
That's the biggest endorsement of tracker funds I think we've heard so far. Moving that table, Larry Elliott at the end. Larry?
You said in answer to an earlier question you thought the Germans would eventually see sense. You also said that the German anti-inflationary psyche runs very deep in their cultural history. Don't you think it's more likely that there will need to be some catalyst for the Germans to change their approach, which might include a country like Greece leaving the euro, rather than the Germans waking up one morning and saying, actually, we've been wrong all along, we're going to change course?
Okay, and just at the front of that table.
Mr. Soros, Damien Rees from the Daily Telegraph. Do you think France will elect a socialist president? Will that be good or bad for the euro crisis?
Okay, so beginning with Germany, will the Germans come to their senses evolutionarily or revolutionarily? I think is what Harry's asking.
Yeah. Well, that's, again, I think a lot depends on what happens in Greece. I think that there is a definite shift in German thinking for the better, in a way, to recognizing that this isn't working. But I think we are quite far yet from really abandoning this one-sided emphasis on inflation as the only threat to stability. I think you really will have to experience the deflation. I mean, you are in fact experiencing it because every country is failing to meet its targets because of the deflationary pressures. And the IMF is pointing out, for instance, in the case of Spain, that if they actually took additional measures to meet the target, that would move them further away from the target. So the evidence is coming through. How much more will they need to recognize that this is a self-defeating course? I can't tell, but I think one should keep on hammering this home so that we can't leave this alone.
A question on French politics. Do you think that France will elect a socialist president? And if you do, will that be a good thing or not such a good thing?
Well, I have no impression yet of what François Hollande stands for. So I am probably as much in the dark as the French electorate. Whether it would be a good thing or not, as I say,
Time will tell.
Yeah, I have no view.
My favourite journalistic expression from years in television. Okay, I'm going to move to the last table. I'm slightly blocked in my view, but I have seen a gentleman standing by the window stand up for probably the longest of anyone in the room.
There's one further.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Frank Kane from the National Newspaper of Abu Dhabi. I just want to ask Mr. Soros' opinion on the oil price and where it will go this year.
You're very consistent, Frank. That was exactly the same question you asked in the co-chair's press conference. Gentleman next.
Mr. Soros, I'm from Novaya Gazeta from Russia. Is there any, in Russia we have some scenarios of political development in the next few years. In your opinion, can these the developments, these different scenarios, affect the economic stability in Europe and in the Eurozone?
Okay, and one last question, I think that'll have to wind it up. Gentlemen, just there.
My name is Giuseppe Sarcina from Corriere della Sera, Italy. I would like to know what you think about Mario Draghi's sentence on rating agency. Said that we would be better to ignore sometimes the advice of rating agencies. And what do you think about Tobin tax? Tobin tax.
Tobin. Let me just take those one at a time. That's our last round of questions. So the first question for you is a good old-fashioned guest question. Would you give us a prediction on the oil price, where it's going?
Well, fortunately, I have this theory which says that the future is unpredictable, and that kind of avoids me having to predict it. However, there's of course tremendous tension with regard to Iran, and I think that the Iranian government is in dire straits because the Arab Spring, which is now affecting Syria, is also going to eventually endanger the Iranian regime, which is already extremely narrowly based and divided, about as divided as it can be without actually collapsing. And therefore, they are desperately looking for some external threat that might hold them together. And that does make the situation very dangerous indeed.
A question on the Eurozone and its impact, I think, in Russia on politics and society there.
Well, I think that something very important is happening in Russia, generally speaking. I think it has, the big thing is that it has become patriotic to be opposed to the Putin regime. And therefore, I think that regime also has to change. I don't expect Putin, or I do expect Putin to remain president, because that's one position that would could give him immunity, so he'll cling to it as long as possible. But the regime has proven itself to be ineffective, and as I say, it's patriotic to be critical. So I think that there is a positive change. And altogether, I'd like to emphasize that while the problems of the euro are very serious indeed, and the developed world is in a very serious political and economic crisis. When you look at the world and you look at what's going on in the developing world, not only economically but politically, the move towards just as Europe has forgotten the principles of open society on which the European, which made the European Union a fantastic object. That fantastic object is attracting genuine enthusiasm in the developing world, all over the world. I spent some time in Burma, and I think that there is a real change there also. So there are very positive developments in the world, as well as the crisis that we confront. And the crisis that we confront, I think, is soluble if we understand the nature of the crisis, and it's really created by the leadership trying to preserve a status quo which is genuinely unsustainable and for many people increasingly intolerable.
Two final questions. Firstly, would you agree with Mario Draghi that we should, on occasion, selectively ignore credit ratings agencies? And secondly, where do you stand vis-à-vis the Tobin tax?
I think that is correct about Draghi, and I think that it's very important to realize that the EFSF is best used in guaranteeing the European Central Bank, because the European Central Bank can accept the EFSF at full faith, whereas the markets don't. So it's the most efficient use of the EFSF.
The Tobin tax.
And the Tobin tax, I think as a source of revenue, I think I'm in favor. But as a way of preventing market excesses, I don't think it will be enough.
Mr. Soros, thank you for an engaging and wide-ranging introduction to this annual meeting. I think we'll all go away with a much better sense of where we want to direct our questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to you too. If you thank Mr. Soros on all our behalf.